Hello everyone, it is Mike Levin on June 21st, 2022, and I'm heading out at around 7 a.m. to do my food shopping. I've been so busy lately with all kinds of projects. A little bit of moving and a little bit of static site generator development, wrangling. So really, I'm using Jekyll, which is a Ruby-based static site generator made by the GitHub people, so it's integrated really well into GitHub. And it was originally called the GitHub.io system because even still, the pages are hosted on a domain called GitHub.io. They're using one of those IO top-level domains. And you can use custom domains, so you can really use it sort of in place of WordPress or Joomla or whatever is your content management poison. And the idea is because it is really based on static files, and by that I mean things like markdown files, they are not driven by a database. Really, not driven by a database is the key differentiator between a static site generator and a more traditional content management system, which is really funny in that, I would think to use the language traditional content management system for something that's back-ended by a database, because the web was born much more on the concept of a static site generator, if you will, because web servers, ever since the early ones, Apache and such, were made to serve a file off of a hard drive. A request comes in over HTTP. A web server like Apache says, oh, do I have that file sitting on the hard drive? If it does, it serves it, sends it back. It loads the .html file, sends it back, and that .html file is already formatted as .html, so it's ready to display in the web browser, and the web server is not really asked to do very much except be the man in the middle, sort of pass the baton. So coding HTML by hand is very much out of style. No one really wants to do it with all those pointy brackets. There's plenty of plugins to help you do it, but who really wants to do it? And there have been a number of ways to sort of abbreviate it, and the most popular one is one that was created by a developer whose nickname is Daring Fireball. I always have to remember his real name, but Daring Fireball put out one of these markdown documents. So you put out the original markdown document, which in the industry serves much the same purpose as these like RFC documents, the request for comment documents that are the authoritative go-to original document on some subject. HTTP has one, and really almost every protocol on the internet and web has one of these things. So Daring Fireball put out one for saying, here's what Markdown is, and it's an abbreviated way to do HTML where other tools can step in and render the Markdown as full markup. See, Markdown, markup, it's a play on words. And so what static site generators are these days, like Jekyll and Hyde, and there's a few others, they take mostly Markdown files and they stylize them. They completely convert them ahead of time in a pre-generated step into the .html. And they not only do that to give it HTML structure, they also layer in the cascading style sheets, the CSS at that time, sometimes using these CSS generators that actually have their own static generation kind of thing going on, so that you can get the advantages of not having to retype all your styles over and over if they inherit from each other. There's SASS, and so these steps are incorporated in as well to spare you as much typing as they can, so that your original source files, both your markdown and your style sheets, can be as small as possible, as brief, as terse, and thus as easy to manage as possible. So enter my static site generator. I call it Skite. I have it on GitHub. It is public. You can look at it. It's not pip installable yet. You gotta excuse me. It's early morning. So I started out with another one called Blog Slicer because I like to keep all my markdown, all my blog-like content as one single long text file. I've got a personal journal that I keep for life, and then I've got a journal for each of the websites I publish and different subject matters. And then I will extract from a master journal and copy paste into these other journals. It's a way to do a single stream, such as it were, because, how is life lived? We are a single stream. We're born, we live, and we die. We are a single stream, a single event, a single chemical reaction playing out, like a candle being lit and then burning to the end. And there's a lot of pigeonholing and a lot of categorizing and subdividing and creating hierarchies and chopping things up and organizing and breaking that flow, that stream of life. And it's worth doing. It's worth organizing. I'm not putting it down, except that it is also worth embracing that single stream format so that you can work at full tilt. You can work at full speed without being inhibited by the organization process, putting things in some sort of hierarchical order. Organizing them as you go can really slow you down. In fact, the whole tagging and labeling process can slow you down. So I have it so that I just write journal entries, boom, 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 top to bottom. In fact, it's reverse chronology, just like a blog. So every time I make a new one, it creates a new entry at the top. You type, and the typing, of course, you're typing down the screen, but it's pushing the whole rest of the blog down as it goes. So it's reverse chronology. It's the standard sort order for blogs. And that file gets longer and longer, and none of the entries really at first have headlines, nor do they have any sort of tags or categories. But I do have keyboard shortcuts in Vim, so anyone who follows me knows I use Vim a lot. And one keyboard shortcut, @H, will find the newest blog entry that doesn't have a headline yet, and it stages it. It sets it up with the hashtags and all for a markdown headline. And so I'll look over the blog post, I'll put in a headline, and now I have another keyboard shortcut. This is a recent development, @T for tagging. Although I'm using the category thing to keep my options open for allowing it to affect the URL, I'm not letting it actually, but in the Jekyll content management system, static site generator system, you can allow your categories to manifest as a subdirectory or as multiple subdirectories. If you have multiple categories, you could have multiple subdirectories in the URL, making it look like subdirectories or folders in the URL. It's a pretty neat trick. So Jekyll can do that with categories, but it doesn't do that with tags. But otherwise, tags and categories seem identical. They can have many-to-many relationships. That's actually quite an important and interesting thing. So you don't have to decide which one category a post goes into. You can have it belong to many. But if I do that, I'm going to use tags for that. Because for categories, I am going to, or already have, made the decision to limit myself to one category per blog post. Every blog post can be put into a single category. Because I use these previous next arrow links. They're actually, the whole title, the whole headline of the next article and of the previous article or blog post, so that you can just go next, and you can see what it's about when you go to it. They're not these sort of dumb, albeit consistent. You can see there's a lot of arrows out on the internet that say previous and next, and maybe they even put a title so that when you hover over it, you can see it. But I don't believe in hiding that. I believe in exposing what you're about to click and visit, so I make my previous next arrows the actual expanded headline or title of those previous and next blog posts or articles. And it cuts across the entire blog in such a way you could step from post to post and go across the entire blog. But this is not particularly desirable in all cases. Sometimes you will want to contain yourself into a particular category. So I have categories like my life stories, the static site generator, Linux playground stuff that I'm doing. And so each of these is a different category with its own set of blog posts. Even though they're in the greater set of that you could step across all the blog posts in the site, I have previously had these next arrows identical at the top and the bottom of every article page. No longer. Now, the next arrows are at the top, which cut across the entire blog, so that whether it's in a category or not, it steps across the entire blog. There's always next, there's no gaps. However, the arrows at the bottom of any given post or blog page are tied to the category it belongs to. If you follow the next arrows at the bottom of the page, you are constrained within the category that the blog post you started surfing from belonged to. Yeah, heavy duty SEO here. Pages are grouped topically by category. Now, they belong to sort of clusters. Even though it's not reflected in the URL, I have decided to not allow this category grouping to reflect in the URL, although I might actually end up doing that so that they look like they are sitting in the directory together. I haven't experimented with that, but I'm not so deep into this that I couldn't make that decision yet. So, in the one case, and there will be no duplicate pages. So in the one case where there is a category, something can have that category in the URL, except I want the freedom to change category names without breaking the URL, so that weighs against it. Now, I can't really change the headline without breaking the URL because the headline becomes the URL. So I have a few decisions to make about how much I want a category to sort of color and predominate the identity of the page. Enough so that there's a surfing experience, so that you can stay within a category during that surfing experience, but perhaps not so much that it makes extra long URLs that are subject to unnecessary breaking as I update category names. Because if I don't change a URL, I can be very flexible with my category names over time. It's just a search and replace in a single file. Replace all occurrences of this with occurrences of that. Bam, new category. No broken URLs. And that's pretty appealing to me too. And then if I want to target the keywords of the category, I do it on page and not in URL, which I'm already doing. I have it in an H4 at this time. And then the last thing is I feel that I want to create index pages for each category. Currently, I'm only making an index page for the entire blog, which can get pretty long. I'm going to have to figure out how to deal with that. Blogger, back in the day, one of the original blogging platforms of the web that I think is pretty much phased out by Google, had this concept of like only the top most recent, and then if you wanted to search, read older ones, you dug deeper, and that dealt with the link dilution problem on the index page, because lots of links on an index page dilutes every link respectively, and that's not great, and it sort of flattens your site out, pancakes it a bit. So I need to solve that. I need to think about that as my blogs get longer. But it's going to be an organic, growing, living system, Skite, a static site generator, which is replacing Blog Slicer. I originally had just the concept of Blog Slicer, released it in PyPy, and didn't understand how I could use the -e, the pip install -e option. And now that I do for a local experimental install, I don't have to release things into PyPy as much for this sort of development. And somehow I turned on two-factor authentication in PyPy and then lost that in Authenticator. So I'm a little bit locked out of my PyPy right now. I can still do releases into things I've made, but I can't like delete the Blog Slicer repo. So I got a few things I need to work on. I've got a case opened with pypy.org to try and get back into my account. But we will see. We will see. It's not the highest priority right now. The highest priority is to just finish out the last few touches on this static site generator that sits on top of Jekyll, which sits on top of GitHub Pages, which used to be GitHub.io, to make the system really great for organizing my mind, organizing my life, and really keeping my foot in the game, keeping my foot in the door of the game, keeping skin in the game, keeping my hat in the ring, throw my hat in the ring, skin in the game, foot in the door of SEO, search engine optimization. If you're not walking the walk, you can't talk the talk. You have to walk the walk to talk the talk. And one of the best ways to walk the walk is to take advantage of the best things out there that are being offered, which don't weigh your life down with heavy technical liability, which these things like Joomla, Mamba, WordPress, Movable Type, all these CMSs of yore that were database back-ended that had all this overhead in your life. If you kept 100 sites, that was 100 instances of WordPress you needed to keep updated over God knows how many different web hosts. Now we can thank Uncle Google, who bought GitHub and provides such easy hosting, such profoundly easy hosting with the GitHub Pages system. And even though there's faster static site generators out there like Hide, which lives on Python, and I don't particularly like the fact that Jekyll, the popular one, is on Ruby, language I personally don't. So if I do local expansion of the system, I have to install a local copy of Ruby, generate things locally, write plugins or whatever in language I don't particularly like, but chances are extremely against that. And so in the very same sense that even though there's other distributed version control systems than Git, would you really use them these days? There's Mercurial, and Mercurial HG is Git compatible. It's written in Python, native Python, optimized in C, so it has a lot going for it. Just like the way Hide does versus Jekyll. Jekyll and Hide. Hide is written in Python. It's faster. Jekyll is written in Ruby. It's slower, but it's the one adapted to GitHub. It's the one that drives GitHub Pages without special exceptions. You can swap off workflow stuff and change it out, but honestly, you lean into the strengths of the mainstream tools to get the advantage of being on the center of the average distribution curve. 20% of the effort to get 80% of the benefit. It's another one of those cases. So anyway, that's where I'll wrap up and do my food shopping, and then maybe join in again later to show you a little bit of where my CMS is, except the workday has begun again, and I've got some stuff I need to do, so that might be a live stream either at lunch or maybe later tonight or some other time real soon. So see you then.